evening, and welcome to this week's episode of Since I Was Young, a podcast dedicated to all things Heart of Midlothian. This week we will be speaking about the week that was a somewhat gruelling week that ended, unfortunately, with Hearts' exit in the Scottish Cup at the hands of Falkirk, thanks to a penalty shootout. Before we get into that, however, we will obviously be touching on the game that took place in midweek, where Hearts welcomed St Mirren to Tynecastle and came away with an impressive 2-0 win, given the circumstances that unfolded during the game. We'll also look ahead to the Celtic fixture, the somewhat season-defining fixture at the moment that I've seen a lot of people refer to it as. Whether you believe that or agree with that or not, we'll obviously dive into that. But before we do, folks, please do consider subscribing to the YouTube channel. You can find it just down below there. Whilst you're there, leave us a comment in the comment section, and you can also find all of our social channels down there. Also, a bit of a personal plug as well. My Just Giving page will be linked down in the description also. We have entered 2026, and for those that don't know, I will be running during the Edinburgh Marathon Festival in May for Big Hearts, so a cause that is very close to all of our hearts and our football club. So if you have a few spare quid lying about, I'm running a half marathon. I've never run that distance before in my life, so if you feel like backing me, please do so. It'd be massively appreciated. With personal plugs out the way, how are you getting on, John?
Can run about 90 feet maximum, Alan, so I feel free. All the very best for that. Certainly, everybody, we all know the great community work that Big Hearts do. So if you can spare a few quid, fire it in for Alan. It will keep him going, I'm sure, through that last couple of miles or whatever it is. I don't even know how long a half marathon would be. I've never even attempted anything that remotely resembles long distance running in my life. So you're a braver man than me, Scrimger. As for how I am, other than that, I'm buzzing. The Hearts women scudded their opposition in the week, 19-0. So I just want to say massive congratulations to them. Wow. The men have been superb in the league this year, but we haven't come close to 19-0. That is a wonderful scoreline. Congratulations to the girls. Moving on to what we're going to talk about, which is the two men's team games. The first of which is St Mirren. Heart of Midlothian 2, St Mirren 0 at Tynecastle last midweek. Alan? I'm fine, by the way.
Well, I mean, with that said and done, let's talk about some football, shall we? Hearts against St Mirren, a big game, a game that obviously followed previous big game against Dundee that we managed to claw 1-0 win with 10 men. The St Mirren game, I feel like heading into it, there was a lot of positivity, a lot of fans that were buzzing because of the win against Dundee and the nature of it. I think a lot of fans felt, right, do you know what, St Mirren have been in poor form. We've managed a very good 1-0 win against Dundee, given the circumstances. Could this be the game that we turn up at Tynecastle and we absolutely scud someone? That was on paper, I think, what a lot of people were thinking, certainly what I was thinking in the lead up to the game, and I know a few others that said similar. Obviously, not every game in Scottish football is going to be easy. There's not really an easy game in the top flight at the moment, but I was very positive heading into a tie against St Mirren. I did feel like, the call to arms from the management and the players and all the things that have been going around about the sort of atmosphere at Tynecastle and how it can be ramped up, etc. We're not going to talk about that in depth because I think that's kind of been done to death at this point. But there was a lot of chat about this game being massive against St Mirren, and as I say, like you mentioned there, an opportunity to go further ahead and kind of put a stamp and a statement out of our own. The game itself, the team selection, let me just grab it up on my phone. I had it there a second ago, but it's my phone's timed out for some annoying reason. We're very professional over here. So
while you're looking through that, I will say I've been on a fair few of these now. I don't know what my hit rate is in my score predictions, but the old Da here got the score correct on the last episode. I predicted 2-0 over St Mirren, so I would just like to pat my own back for that, because it's not very often that I get it right on the money.
No, completely, absolutely. I actually forgot about that. I think I predicted maybe a 3-1 or a 3-0 or something, so maybe I was a wee 3-0. Bit... Was it 3-0? Aye, I was a wee bit wide of the mark, but only just. But I've managed to get the team sheet up.
It could have been if we had kept 11 men on the park, but we'll get to that.
Yeah, well, I mean, the team selection, obviously, Craig Gordon returned in goal due to the suspension for Schwolow. Steinwender at right back. We also had a rare start for Blair Spittle. He came into the team, and I think his inclusion is kind of what I want to talk about most when it comes to the lineup, because I saw lots of people that were surprised at the fact he was in. A lot of people were questioning it. A lot of people were wondering, why is he playing? What's going on there? People were sort of crying out for like a Kurjota to start on the right hand side, and maybe I was one of those. But Blair Spittle was the preferred man on the right hand side of the midfield four, or midfield three, if you wanted to say that. But I think it started out as a four and kind of gradually changed as the game went on, obviously due to circumstance. But I like Blair Spittle. I don't think he's a bad football player. I think he's been very professional. He's not played a lot of minutes, but again, we've spoken about it last week about players coming in from the cold and making an impact, and I think Blair Spittle did certainly that, and his role became very important in the games that went on. We just jumped to the first real incident of note from the St Mirren tie, and that was, of course, the Benny red card. Now, we know Benny is not that type of player. He's not a rash tackler. He's not that sort of guy. But the pass that was played to him, I think it was from Finlay, was a bit short, and it kind of sold Benny a little bit. He had two St Mirren players on him, closing him down, and then he loses the ball and then goes to win it back. And his foot is high, and he connects with the opponent. I can't remember who it was, but he connects with him. And it's one of those that if the St Mirren player's foot was planted, that's a leg breaker. Thankfully, it wasn't, and I think the St Mirren player was actually fine after it. So that's a small blessing, I suppose. Benny initially gets a yellow card from the referee. How the referee doesn't think that's a red is ridiculous. And we, on this podcast and lots of other podcasts, like to bash VAR, like to bash referees for being useless and hopeless, etc. In that occasion, VAR was correct to upgrade it to a red. I think if we did not have VAR and the referee only gave a yellow, I mean, obviously I'd be delighted because Benny would have stayed on the pitch, but the correct decision was reached thanks to the technology. So you could argue that VAR has finally got something correct, albeit against us.
Yeah, Benny is too technically gifted and too classy a player to be making a challenge like that. Like you say, I think the pass was pretty poor, but I don't know what he's thinking. Like, what is he doing with his feet that high? If you're in a 50-50 situation, you shouldn't be going in like that. It's madness. And I think he knew it as well from reports. He was apparently in tears after the game, or after the red. A real brain fart from a guy who's usually far too classy to make such mistakes. I won't lie. When he was sent off, I didn't have a great feeling about things. We held on for dear life for an entire half of the Dundee game. It felt like 75 minutes of a disadvantage in terms of numbers was going to be too tall an ask after the shift that they had put in against Dundee. Fortunately, the St Mirren player was all right. I think we're just lucky that his leg wasn't broken, like you said. If he had had his feet planted, that could have ended up a very serious injury. As it turned out, we managed to get a result again, but it was a bit more stressful for a while than it really should have been. It had been a fairly even game up to that point. I think Hearts looked quite positive. St Mirren, however, I think had the two best early chances, and in fact had the ball in the back of the net, which were both flagged for offside, both correctly, it should be said.
Yeah.
But it was a pretty entertaining and competitive game for the first quarter hour. And then the sending off just kind of changes the dynamic of the game and the entire atmosphere of the situation. From the stands, the atmosphere, I think, was a massive plus in the St Mirren game, which we'll talk about that later, because the dichotomy between that and the Scottish Cup exit, I think, are quite notable. The fans really rallied around the players, and when they went down to 10, there was never that feeling of giving up. And that was a wonderful thing to see, because this is a team that has shown that time and time again, the backbone, the togetherness, the grit, the willingness to fight, and they did that.
Yeah, completely agree. I think as well, the thing that stood out for me, and I think obviously it's because we were the home side and the impetus was on us to go and win. And obviously St Mirren are not in good form; they haven't been in great form since they won the League Cup. The thing that stood out for me was the change that was, or the fact that there wasn't a change made. Derek McInnes, obviously different circumstances against Dundee because it was our goalkeeper that got sent off. So of course you have to bring somebody off to bring on a goalkeeper. But Benny was sent off, and there was no tactical change. It wasn't right. I'm going to bring on a defender, or I'm going to take a forward off. I think Derek McInnes knows that he wouldn't get away with that at Tynecastle. We're at home. We should be on the front foot, and I think leaving the attacking threats on the pitch was a big plus, and I think an important move from McInnes to just, like I say, give us that out ball. Despite being down to 10 men, you're still looking at it going, on paper, we still win this game. We're the better side of the two, in better form, and on paper, yes, we've gone down a man, but if we leave our forward threats on the pitch, it gives St Mirren something to think about, and I think that was kind of how the game unfolded. You're absolutely right. What you say about the two offside goals, they were both correct. However, the second one was a lot tighter than I had first thought. When I saw it back, I watched it just this afternoon again. I don't remember it being quite as close as that when I watched it the first time, but it was correct. It was offside. Both goals were offside, so thankfully they were. Again, VAR doing something correct. What a surprise! But yeah, I don't know about you, but at half time, I still felt comfortable. I still felt confident. I still felt like, okay, we've shown enough. If we just keep doing our thing, yes, St Mirren have got a threat about them, but we seemed quite content with how we were playing. And I think there was a lot of, like you say, we had a few chances that we could have put away in the first half, but we just didn't manage to. But at half time at 0-0, I was content.
Yeah, it was a calculated risk it was taken by Derek McInnes to leave the front three on. All three of them looked very lively. They worked well together that night, and they put in an insane shift, especially Lawrence Shankland. I think he kind of filled that area of the pitch between the attack and where Benny Beningame had been situated at times.
Yeah.
Kind of going back to that mode of like playing everywhere, which we've seen him do from time to time. He was probably my man in the match. The only other person that I would maybe consider for that would be a guy who, Alan, when I'm wrong, and I don't mind admitting when I'm wrong. I'm man enough to do so. When the lineup came out and I saw that Blair Spittle was starting on the right-hand side, you'll remember that I was in the chat and I was a bit perplexed by that choice. I was wondering aloud exactly why Blair Spittle was starting this game. Boy, was I wrong, because my God, he put in a shift. He was superb.
He did.
It's the best. I think that game might well be the best that I've seen Blair Spittle play in a Hearts jersey.
Yeah,
especially
I can't
when we
disagree.
go down to 10 men. When we go down to 10 men, he stepped up big time. He really helped fill that gap. So massive props to Blair Spittle. I'll never doubt you again, Blair.
We've got that on record now. We've got that down. But yeah, you're right, and I think it was more just a case of, again, like we said against Dundee, every player had to put in their job, but also an extra bit. And obviously, we saw them do it against Dundee. We saw them do it against St Mirren. Second half gets underway. Obviously, there's a few back and forward, and yeah, I'm not going to lie. The longer the game went, I was starting to think, right, maybe this isn't going to be the hammering I thought it would be. Maybe we are just going to have to settle for another scrappy 1-0 if we can get it. Which in itself would have shown character and grit that you've spoken about there, about the team spirit and all the rest of it. The biggest incident or the biggest issue from the second half, aside from the 2 goals, was obviously Cammy Devlin's injury, which could prove to be massive, unfortunately. But we'll talk about that, I think, probably a little bit more when we come to the Celtic preview at the end, or certainly I've got points to make when we're talking about that. It was... I love Cammy, and I think he's been absolutely outstanding this season. Despite the forward players that we've got running the show in terms of the goals and assists, I think Cammy Devlin walks away with Player of the Year for me by a distance. I think what we're seeing from him recently, he is the best at what he does, but that carries a risk of, if he's not available, who does what he does, and that I think is where we're at now. But again, like I say, I'll touch on that a bit later. But when I saw Cammy going off, it was bad. It looked bad. I was very worried. Thankfully, we scored a couple of goals. We get the 3 points, and it's it's a win. You spoke about Blair Spittle. His involvement in Shankland's goal was not understated. He wins the ball back, feeds it into, I think it might have been Braga, but I can't remember off the top of my head. And then he gets it back and plays a wicked cross into the box. And Shankland, he loves these little one-touch finishes where he just puts it in the opposite direction. The goalkeeper has no chance, and it's past him before he's even realised.
Yeah, it was very similar to Paulo Dybala's goal in the Roma win over Torino last night, funnily enough. Don't know if you saw the goals, but it's actually quite similar when you watch it. That was a lovely finish for Shankland. That's how you know he's feeling good and how you know his confidence is up when he starts putting away like that. Like you say, a killer ball, just really difficult to get to if you're a defender when it's struck with that kind of pace and that accurately. And of course, Shankland's there to do the job. I felt as soon as that went in, I was fairly confident that we were going to win because I must say St Mirren were very poor in the second half. In much the same way that, or conversely to how Dundee tried to approach the game after they went up a man, they tried to exploit the wide areas, notably, which makes sense when you've got a man advantage. So Mirren never did that. They kind of tried to go route one, and it didn't work. And it was never going to work. Their finishing in the second half was dire as well. I don't think Craig Gordon had a save to make, really, that I can recall. It was quite a quiet night for Gordon, who, by the way, I should point out, 1.5 games played, 2 clean sheets in the 2025-26 season. Just wanted to mention that. It never felt like they posed much. At times you would have felt like it was Hearts that had a man advantage in the second half, and it was quite bizarre after how positively St Mirren had played in the first 45 minutes. But yeah, as soon as Shankland scores that goal, it felt like, you know what, yeah, this looks like it's going to be in the bag as long as we can, keep up this sort of level of energy, and we can just defend anything that happens to get over the midfield. But there wasn't too much to deal with.
No, and I think I'm sure Chesnikov was on the bench for the St Mirren game, but I don't think he obviously didn't get on. I think in other circumstances he probably would have, but down to 10 men, it's maybe not the right time for him to come on. But obviously he had a cameo against Falkirk, which we'll touch on shortly. But the game was wrapped up by Big Tam Magnuson just doing Big Tam Magnuson things and just popping up wherever he wants to. I've praised Big Tam Magnuson quite a lot over the last few weeks because I'm a big fan of his. I think it's the chaotic style of his midfield play. He just seems to pop up everywhere, and he's not brilliant at really anything, but he's good at what he does, and he's not obviously. I think Magnuson himself would admit he's probably played a few more minutes than he probably thought he would have at this stage, but it's again due to the need to have midfielders in there and a lack of fit ones, which is why Magnuson appears to have just kind of found his way into the team, and he's not getting taken out of it. He follows up. I can't remember who had the shot. Was it Spittle, perhaps, that hits the shot, and Magnuson, it gets saved by the goalkeeper, and Magnuson just sort of follows it up and heads it into the net. I can't remember who hit the shot. I'm saying it was Spittle.
It was either Spittle or Shankland.
One or t'other, but yeah.
Was Shankland off by that point? Because it was either him or Spittle, I'm sure.
Maybe I can't remember off the top of my head. It's been a long week, but
it really has.
Yeah, it was nice to see Magnuson following up and just getting in there and putting it away and kind of securing that 3 points that, like you say, we were pretty confident of getting when we went 1-0 up. But just to put a seal on it and be like, right, that's it, game's in the bag. It was fantastic, and I think you touched on it before about that grit and that character within this group of players, and I think guys like Spittle epitomised that, and I said we've spoken before about squad depth and having guys that just come in out the cold and put in a shift and do their jobs, and we had a lot of that against St Mirren, and it was an important win. Obviously took us clear from the two below, the chasing pack. Big win, and obviously it was important to get that result, especially going down to 10 men. The work and the effort and the energy that those players must have expelled in that game was quite something, but I think you could sort of see the kind of fatigue setting in at that point, and that was only the midweek game. But again, like I said previously, when you're down to 10 men, you need to put in that little bit extra, and every player did. You mentioned Spittle, I want to mention Harry Milne. I thought he was fantastic as well, but I feel like he's one of these guys that we don't praise enough because we just feel like, well, he gets it often enough as it is. But it was another fantastic performance from Harry Milne, and we've become accustomed to those sorts of performances from him. Was there Anything else from St Mirren you wanted to highlight before we talk about the end of the week?
No, just gritty 3 points. It was massive in the way that added that cushion, the extra. We kept that 3 point cushion just in case worst case scenario happens this weekend. Being six clear means that even in the worst case scenario, we stay top by a clear margin of points. So massive 3 points to get, especially after the amount of effort that they had to expel in the previous game against Dundee. So yeah,
Yeah.
just a massive 3 points. Like there's nothing else to really cover, I think, from St Mirren.
Yeah, I mean, Derek McInnes mentioned after the game that he thought that that was our best win of the season, but he also said the game at Dens Park was our best win of the season. So we've had two best wins of the season in a week, which is nice. And I think, obviously, it points to the fact we went down to 10 men and all that, the extra that we had
I
to put
strongly
in. But
suspect that if we beat Celtic by any scoreline, he's going to say the exact same thing. I think this is just going to be
yeah,
what he says every week now that we win.
yeah, that's fair. I mean, we've got cup finals in front of us that are very, very important. Obviously, one actual cup final that we won't be getting to is in the Scottish Cup, unfortunately, having exited at the hands of Falkirk. I tried to sort of segue us into that there. I don't know about you, but for me, and I'm kind of skipping ahead a little bit because I don't really want to rattle through everything that happened during the game in as much detail. But heading into the game against Falkirk, when I saw, even going back as far as when I saw the draw that we got when we drew Falkirk at home, there was an element of confidence because we're at home, but there is also that element of it's another Premiership side. And Falkirk have done fantastically well this season. I don't think that can be doubted. I think, they got promoted, and I'm not going to lie, I didn't really know what to expect from them. I'd heard they've been playing some nice football in the Championship, but I kind of thought, right, they'll come up to the Premier League and they won't be able to do that. Like they'll have to change somewhat. But John McGlynn and his coaching staff have firmly shut me up because I think they're inside the top six at the moment or just flirting on the edges of it. They're not going to get relegated, which I think would be their first objective upon getting promoted, which is huge. They pose their own threats and their own risks, and that was a worry to me when I saw that we'd drawn them. I would much rather have had an Auchinleck Talbot or an Annan, but those are only reserved for other sides. But what were your thoughts heading into the game?
I'm not shocked by how well Falkirk are doing. Anyone who was watching the show back when we were looking for a new manager will remember that I was quite in favour of the possibility of John McClint coming back. At one point, he was touted as a potential replacement for Liam Fox. He's a tremendous manager. He's a great coach. We know this from his time at Hearts. Obviously, he was in terms of management, he was fairly unlucky, I think, with the timing. But he's always been a fantastic coach. He has taken Falkirk from struggling in the Championship to mid-table in the Premiership in almost no time. So I'm not shocked by how well they're doing, and I was not shocked by how organised they were, the threats they posed. Hearts looked pretty shattered. I don't feel like we really got going, which is kind of to be expected. However, what I will say is that I think this week and the weekend has sealed our fate in terms of what we are going to accomplish this year, which for me, and I hate to be a doomsayer, but I feel like this is basically confirmed that we are not going to win any silverware this year. It's not just being knocked out of the cup, it's the condition of Cammy Devlin. It's the suspension of Benny Beningame for this massive game that we have coming up. We've proven that we can win without Benny in big games like that. I don't know that we've proven we can win without Cammy Devlin in big games like that this year. And I certainly don't know if we've got it in us to beat Celtic without either of them. Celtic a month ago, yeah, I would probably say that our under 20s could probably beat them on a good day, but this is a different Celtic. It's a Celtic that are going to show much more tenacity. It's Martin O'Neill's Celtic, and we know them pretty well.
Yeah.
The injuries to Devlin, and also we don't know how serious Shankland's situation is. It seems like there's been a lot of back and forth of it's not that serious, and he might be available for Sunday, but also we don't know quite how serious it might be. And I guess probably he and the club don't know how serious it's going to be long term until he's been back in training and he's tested it out. So I'm concerned there. I don't know how we're going to fare against Celtic, but I do think that long term this is going to hurt us. I felt that the Scottish Cup, frankly, was our best opportunity at silverware, and I think that we sort of chucked that away. Um,
Yeah, I think
Granted,
it's.
there's the
I
mitigating
think
factor of the fatigue and the injuries, but I do think we've sort of chucked it away.
yeah, I kind of agree with you to an extent, but I feel like, and this is sort of something I posted up on the Facebook page after the loss. To me, and we've not really spoken about the game as such, but let's be honest, there wasn't really a great deal to talk about aside from the main events during the game, which we'll touch on shortly. But I went into it very much like you, looking at it as a realistic opportunity for silverware, because that tends to be our usual sort of thoughts every season. It's try and finish third and get as far as you can in the cup, and maybe try and win the Scottish Cup or win the League Cup. But we'll probably win that when hell freezes over. But every season you want at least a shot at silverware, and we've gotten out at the first opportunity to do so in both the League Cup and the Scottish Cup. Um, Granted, both on penalties and both under different circumstances, but it's I'm with you in that sense of it feels like a realistic opportunity at silverware. But I think, and this is a point that I kind of wanted to make, the atmosphere, and I know I said I wouldn't go into it, and I'm not going to spend all night talking about it, but the atmosphere against St Mirren was electric. It was from minute 1 to minute 90. The players were backed from the stands because the fans know, right, we can be that extra man that helps, that rallies them. And I think there was a difference in the atmosphere in the Falkirk tie. And I don't know whether that was fans perhaps complacency and thinking, oh, it's the Scottish Cup. We've got bigger fish to fry. We're in the league title race, etc., etc. We're not really bothered about this. Because like you, and like I just said, we should always be bothered about the Scottish Cup. Like, it's an important competition, and it's one that we should be looking to at least get to semi-finals and finals of. I put a post out on Twitter just asking, just canvassing general opinion, and a lot of people suggested that it was due to season ticket holders not being in their regular seats due to the way that ticket sales work for the Cup. That could have an impact on it. There was also some people saying that there wasn't as many regulars in, and people were sort of spotting a lot more families with their kids and such going to the game, rather than your usual fans that go every week. But all of those things are perhaps a point about it. But I'm not going to go too much more into the atmosphere, because I've had a lot of back and forward on social medias today about it, and just kind of done with it, to be honest with you. But the game itself started, I don't think, too badly. I think we kind of took a bit of time to get going, and Falkirk, to be fair to them, for the whole game had a plan and they executed it very well. We seemed to have a plan, but we just didn't have that final ball, didn't have that final bit to get the ball over the line, unfortunately. Falkirk did. They managed to score. We had a goal not long before Falkirk took the lead. That was ruled out. Again, Big Tam Magnuson popping up again in his chaotic best in the box to put the ball away, and VAR overruled due to a handball in the box. Now, John, I'm going to hand over to you for your take on the VAR, because we had a bit of back and forth in the group chat earlier, and I feel like you should take this rant on.
Yeah. Ours was, I don't know if it was the only game of the round, but it was one of the very few games of the round that were using VAR. And it baffles me that in a tournament, a professional sports tournament, that every match of a given round of a tournament essentially has different rule sets. Because if you have VAR in one match and you don't have it in another, that fucks with the competitive balance, frankly. It's completely absurd to have VAR in one match and not the other in the same competition at the same stage, just because it happens to be something that's applicable in one stadium and not the other. If you can't use it in either of the stadiums, it shouldn't be used in either of them.
Yeah.
Quite frankly, I think it's just absurd. That's my take on it.
Yeah.
Obviously, I understand it. I guess the rules are that if it's applicable and implementable, then they do to make it fairer. Mm-hmm. But to make one game fairer by using VAR and not do the same for every other game virtually, that then becomes unfair. It's fucking with the fairness of it. It messes with the competitive balance of the tournament. So
Yeah.
I'm a bit annoyed on two levels, really, that goal was not. The angle that I saw watching the game, I couldn't see the ball actually hit Thomas Magnuson in the hand or the arm. I think you mentioned that you watched it live, though, and there was an angle that did look like that was the case. I'll have to take a bit for that. I didn't see that angle.
Yeah.
Beyond that, though, there was a fella that had a fistful of his jersey and was yanking him all over the place, so he was being fouled during that period. So um, there's, an argument to be made that he should have had a penalty if that was the case.
Yeah, and I think as well.
And also, it came off two Falkirk players' arms on the way to Thomas Magnuson. So there's so much wrong with that. And then for VAR to chop that off for a handball is to me that pisses me off. It boils my piss, so it does, Alan. I'm not fond of that, especially considering, like I say, just the inherent imbalance that comes with using VAR in some matches and not using it in others.
Mhm.
It's completely batshit.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with you. I think it was something to do with the fact it was a televised match, and you have to have it on if it's available, etc. But I know there were other games that were the Premiership sides against each other, and they chose to not use it. They turned it off. Basically, I don't understand why we couldn't just do that. But you know what? That's by the by. I agree with you. I'm not gonna lie. I agree with you. I understand why it was ruled out because the rules of the game are if it hits a hand then it's disallowed, and I get that. But my biggest bugbear with that particular incident was the point that you mentioned. There are two Falkirk players and it hits off both of them before the ball then sort of rebounds to Magnuson. So it's not as if he's moved his arm towards the ball, it's the ball's just come to him at that angle in that place, and he's put it away. And as I say,
To the
I'm a big
contrary,
Tam
it seemed
Mags.
to me like Magnuson was going out of his way to avoid touching the ball with his arm. He was trying
Yeah,
to move out of his way. I guess if he was at such close quarters with those two guys, like I say, one of them was practically up his jersey. Um,
yeah,
and it was difficult for him to manoeuvre any part of his body out of the way from the ball. I think he did the best he possibly could in that situation. So it's especially
yeah.
frustrating.
Yeah, I think as well there was another moment during the game that I think it was Blair Spittle. There was a trip in the box and VAR didn't even look at it. And that could have quite easily been a penalty as well. So there's a couple of incidents there that you kind of
Yeah.
look at and go, on another day they go another way. But do you know what? It's annoying, but it would have given us a lead and it would have given us something to build on. But sadly, that didn't happen. Falkirk then went up the other end and down our left hand side, a ball came in. I can't remember the Falkirk winger's name, but he impressed me all day. And he gets the ball at the box, and it's a relatively comfortable finish, annoyingly. But that's the risk that you run if you don't put the ball in the net. You have that possibility that the opposition will get one, and that's exactly what happened. And to be fair to Falkirk, I'm not going to say they didn't deserve it because I think they did. I think over the piece they deserved to win the game, albeit penalties is an element of a lottery. The other point of note was obviously, you mentioned it previously, Shankland going off with an injury, which we are yet to hear the extent of. I'll touch on my thoughts on that when we kind of talk about Celtic in a moment or two. But the game just sort of seemed to be sort of plodding along. There wasn't really too much happening, and it kind of got a bit flat, and the atmosphere got a bit flat with it. Which again I can understand because the fans are not encouraged by what they're seeing on the pitch. It's difficult to back it, which is the kind of cliched line about it, and that's as much as I'm going to say on the atmosphere. Um, the next element that I enjoyed was I've gone into darkness. I don't know what's happened to my camera. Sorry, folks. The next part that I really enjoyed was the introduction of Islam Sheznikov. He was involved. I really don't know what's happened to my camera. Something's gone wrong, but I'll leave it with that. Islam Sheznikov came off the bench and made an impact with one of his first involvements. He took the ball. It was a crossfield pass, and he sort of got a bit of good fortune because it ricocheted back to him off the Falkirk player's face, I believe it was, and he controls it well, knocks it past the defender, and gets taken out in the box. He does very well to kind of get his body across and win the foul. Signs of an intelligent football player there, and that's very satisfying to see. Shankland, who was still on the pitch at that point, steps up and takes the penalty and scores the penalty and gives us a lifeline. What did you feel about this sort of brief cameo from Chesnikov? What were your first impressions?
I was overawed that it was happening. The moment just felt so surreal. The man exists. Islam Chesnikov was making it feel like Moby Dick or the Yeti. It was like some kind of legend or cryptid. Very pleasing. early impression there. I think he clearly has a lot of physical strength. He's also got some pace about him. And like you say, football IQ, which both of us are massively fond of, as everyone knows. He didn't play too much of the game, but what I saw, I was really liking, and considering that that's the first ball he's kicked competitively, and who knows how long, like it makes me quite excited to see what he's going to be capable of when he's fully fit and match fit, and when he's had a chance to gel with his teammates. So yeah, very pleasing.
Well, I've had a few moments there to try and sort my camera out, but for some reason it's not working, so I'm just going to have to go with this for now. So apologies, you'll not get to see me for the rest of this episode unless I can figure it out. But yeah, no, I'm with you. I was impressed with Chesnikov. I thought he particularly showed a lot of, like I said, intelligence to win that penalty. He didn't do a great deal else, but he certainly in little flashes was reasonable, and it's certainly a nice cameo to kind of start with. But the scoring of the penalty obviously took us into extra time, which was largely a non-event. If I'm being quite honest with you, it was almost like both teams were just sort of waiting for penalties. There were a couple of chances at both ends, but nothing particularly brilliant. I think it was Spittle had a free kick that went over the bar. There was a few sort of little chances here and there, but penalties seemed inevitable. Obviously, Shanklin went off and was replaced by Elton Kabangu, who we'll talk about in a moment, for his role in the penalty shootout. Falkirk had 5 penalties and they scored them all, and obviously we had 4, and Elton Kabangu missed 1. So yeah, it's a bugbear of mine watching a penalty shootout and a man doesn't even hit the target. Make the goalkeeper make a save is the bare minimum that I want from a penalty shootout. He puts it as far wide as I've seen a penalty go. I liked Elton Kabangu last season. He was a bright spark in an otherwise pretty crap second half of the season. But there's something, I talk about players coming in and making an impact when they come off the bench and players kind of grasping the opportunity. Kabangu hasn't had as many opportunities as your Kaboris, for example, but he just doesn't seem to be at the races. And it frustrates me. I know there's whispers about a potential exit in January, so that may well be something that might develop. But yeah, it's not ideal.
God, I hate penalty shootouts. It's not. I would abolish them. I would rather play infinite replays than ever have a penalty shootout. I can't stand them. Listen, it's neither you or I have had to take a penalty during a shootout in a professional football match, so I'm not really too keen to judge Kabangu for that. He certainly does seem to have dropped off from last year, but he hasn't really had the opportunities that a professional footballer needs to be able to sort of show what they're capable of fully. So I'm not. I don't blame him for it. Like the game, I think we had chucked it by the time he came on the park. Honestly, we should have won that game in regulation. Realistically, we didn't do enough to do that. So penalty shooters are such a lottery that I feel like, yes, he missed it, and yeah, there's the argument that you have to at least put it on target. Like I say, neither of us know what that pressure feels like.
Yeah,
Maybe again, if the atmosphere had been more positive and had been more, more of a rallying cry to kind of give the guys a bit of momentum, maybe he would have been better placed to finish that better. But as it stands, it just wasn't there, and it just was one of those nights. There's not really much more to say about it. I feel for him. I always feel for footballers when they have a situation like that where they've missed a crucial penalty in a shootout, because everyone blames them. And it's a situation that no footballer should ever have to be in the first place. Shootouts are an absolutely dreadful way to decide 120 minutes of football. That's my take on it. Like, it's just awful. I hate it, and I wish it would go away.
Yeah, I think it kind of wraps up that particular game. I mean, like I've said throughout, Falkirk, fair play to them. I'll salute them and wish them well for the rest of the tournament. The one positive, if you want to take a positive out of it, it means that we're going to have a free weekend when the cup ties are on, and that might be helpful depending on how the season pans out.
Could be a good point, actually. Later on in the season, that might be the days that we are able to either put in that extra work or get that extra wee day of rest that we might not have gotten.
Yeah,
That might be a good point. Might actually help us in
yeah,
the league.
yeah. I think that's the takeaway I took from it. As much as I kind of don't like going out of the Scottish Cup, it gives us that cushion perhaps to, and I think that maybe softened the blow a little bit for me of us going out. Obviously, like I said when we started talking about this game, you never want to lose a cup tie, but you've got to look at the positives. And I said it, as I say, the message I put on Facebook after the game was kind of like a, there will be highs and lows throughout any campaign. So if this is a low, we've seen a lot of highs this season, then we take this one on the chin and we move on. And that is what we will do. Obviously, at the end of a grueling week, 3 games in a week, 2 of those games where we were down to 10 men for the vast majority. Mentally and physically, you could see a lot of the players were shattered. Obviously, Halkett went off. Benny had some cramp, but obviously he's going to serve his suspension for the next 2 games, so there's not too much of a concern about him. We're obviously already without Cammy Devlin and obviously Shanklin picking up an injury as well. We definitely had some wounds following that game. Halkett thankfully is fine for Celtic. There's no drama there, so thankfully that was okay. Shanklin is an interesting one. Obviously, time of recording, it's Monday evening. We don't know what the extent of the Lawrence Shanklin injury is. I've heard whispers that it's not as bad as they first thought and he might be all right for Celtic. And I've had other whispers that he's going to be out for 3 weeks. So, we will wait and see what happens on that front. The next tie, obviously, as I spoke about at the start of the episode, is Celtic. They come to Tynecastle. You made a little point about this being a Martin O'Neill Celtic and being a different Celtic to the team that we faced previously. And I agree with you because there has been a somewhat improvement. I'm not going to say a marked improvement. I'm not going to say that they look like world beaters all of a sudden. They have a little bit more about them, which, considering their previous, it's very hard to not have a little bit more about you. But I'm very, very interested in this particular game. Obviously, selection wise, we are going to have some headaches. Derek McInnes is going to have some headaches to deal with. Midfield, we are currently down to bare bones. We only have Blair Spittle and Big Tam Magnuson as the only 2 fit, recognised central midfielders. Obviously, Harry Milne has done a shift in there. In fact, he played in there against Falkirk for a spell. It's going to be interesting to see what happens and what combinations get picked. You mentioned not having Cammy and Benny is a big blow, and I think that nails it. Both of them complement each other so well, and you see the best of them when they play together, particularly this season. So not having either of them is a big, big blow for us. I wonder what we will see. I wonder if in this week coming we are going to see some transfer business. Derek McInnes kind of hinted at it after the Falkirk game. He sort of said, I'll speak to Graham Jones tomorrow. I've spoken to the board. I feel like there's some things that we could maybe do. But we'll wait and see. Obviously, Mato, the left winger from Uganda, has signed a pre-contract. There's lots of whispers that we're trying to get him in now. Whether we'd get him in and clearance, etc., in time to play Celtic, I highly doubt, because I imagine the work permit offices might be closed on this particular week to avoid that from happening. No conspiracy there whatsoever. Before anybody points that out, but I do wonder if we will look at a central midfielder between now and the Celtic game, and I hope if we do, it is somebody that can come in and hit the ground running, which is very difficult to find in January. But we are down to bare bones. There was talk about bringing back Tate from his loan at Livingston. However, I think somebody had mentioned, it might have been Joe Sked or Barry Anderson, I can't remember, but somebody mentioned that we've passed a particular deadline to be able to bring him back without paying some sort of fee to sort of cut the loan short. So that kind of rules that out as an option. Like I say, people have spoken about Harry Milne potentially being in midfield. I do think there'll be lots of selection headaches, and even more so if Lawrence Shanklin doesn't fit. But with all that said and done, I don't know why. I'm not going to say I feel confident, because my confidence has been massively dented over the last few days. But I've watched Celtic on a couple of occasions since Martin O'Neill has taken the job back again. Falkirk ran them incredibly close in a recent fixture. And even their win against Auchinleck Talbot was only by 2-0. Yes, they rotated slightly, but it wasn't impressive either. And I do still feel like this Celtic team has some weaknesses. And for as much as we can wallow in our own pity and our own disappointments and our own issues, I don't think everything is as rosy at Celtic as they'd like you to think it is. I think obviously they're still crying out for some transfers as well. Whether they'll get them or not remains to be seen. I've gone on a bit of a rant there, but you can put your thoughts in now, and I'll ask you for a prediction once you're done.
Globally agree with you, to be fair. I think Celtic have improved. I think that they are more built now for the long term, which is why I think that we're less likely to really challenge for the title towards the back end of the season, especially with the tired legs, with the injuries that are starting to creep up. Um, if we get someone in, like you say, it's pretty imperative that it be someone who's good to go straight away, and that's going to cost you, and it's going to be difficult to find someone who is available at all that's going to be ready to play. If someone's playing, then they're playing for a reason. Um, but yeah, like there's always the possibility that Celtic show up and don't have it, because we've seen that plenty of times this year. Like you say, they struggled against Falkirk. They're still not firing on all cylinders, and I feel like I've mentioned this a few times this year. Um, I've kind of been waiting for them to start firing on all cylinders. Eventually, it's going to happen. They're going to break out of the. Nah, it just hasn't happened. Um, I just hope it's not going to happen this Sunday against us, which history would suggest there's a chance of that happening. Yeah, I'm nervous about this game because I think it's such a massive. It's probably the biggest league game that Hearts have played. Maybe not in our lifetime, but it's got to be up there. Considering the stakes, if we go 9 clear, that changes things. Like that means that we are very much on the path to potentially being title favourites. If they win, it goes back to 3 points, and who knows what could happen. But with the injuries and tired legs that are keeping in, it's going to be tougher and tougher to keep a 6 point lead. If it goes to 9, though, that could. Oh, and Derek we trust. I guess it's just trust Derek, trust the wizard, and hope that Shankland is, as wrestling fans would say, selling. Hopefully, it's not as bad as it looked.
Yeah, I think there's been, like I say, there's been whispers over the last few hours about it, and some people are saying it's not as bad as they first thought it would be. It was Derek McInnes saying it doesn't look good. That was the kiss of death. He said the same thing about Cammy when he went off with his injury against St Mirren. So that there's elements of that, but I think if there is any question or possibility of Lawrence Shankland being fit for Celtic, I think what I would do is just keep what they're saying. Just say we're not sure, we don't know, and obviously during the week there'll be the usual build-up. There'll be the wee clips of training from the Orium where they'll be running about enjoying themselves. Don't have Shankland in any of those. Keep him under wraps, because if we can keep it quiet, obviously if he's going to be out long term, we're going to find out. But if he's fit and able to play and able to take part in training, don't have him doing the media duties. Don't have him doing anything. Hide him away from all those cameras. Keep Celtic guessing, because that could be a little ace in the hole for us if there is by some miracle that he's going to be all right. I'm choosing to be optimistic that he's going to be fit to play some part, but we shall see. Tynecastle, we've spoken kind of a little bit about the atmosphere over the last couple of games. It needs to be rocking at this on Sunday for the visit of Celtic, and I'm sure it will be. It's a big game, important game. You mentioned that they've recently introduced the light show after every goal, and also at the start of the game the light show and the wee fireworks and all the rest of it, the flames and all that. It all adds up to it, and it all brings a little bit of an extra element. Tynecastle needs to be toxic on Sunday, because you're right, there has been a little uptick in Celtic's performances. Whatever we can do to get at them. And I still think they're vulnerable in certain areas. Like you, I'm nervous for the game because I don't know which way it's going to go. But Celtic do still have some vulnerabilities. So, like I said, for as much as we talk about our own issues and our own injuries, etc., we do need to be looking at Celtic and going, right, they've not strengthened, they've not brought anybody in that's new, that hasn't played against us yet. We know their team. We know how to get at them. We need to do it again, because, yeah, you're right, this game is massive. And if come full time on Sunday we're 9 points ahead of them, does that rule them out the title race? You don't know. You can't say that, but it certainly stacks the odds against them, if you were a betting man. it'll be very, very interesting. I'll give you my prediction, and then you can tell me yours. I'm going to go for a draw. I'm going to go for a sit on the fence, 1-1 draw. I'm not going to give you a scorer, but that's what I'm going with.
We're completely overlooking the wild card here, and that is, does Chesnikov start? And if Chesnikov starts, what does he have about him? He might be our secret weapon. He might actually, he could very well turn up at Tynecastle on Sunday and tear Celtic's left side apart. That's what I'm hoping is going to happen. And you know what? I'm going to predict that that's exactly what's going to happen. I think Hearts are going to beat Celtic 2-1. Chesnikov is going to score one, and he's going to set up the other. It's going to be the Chesney show.
It's an interesting point because I actually didn't mention it, but Chesnikov for Kazakhstan has been played as a central striker. So there is also a possibility that he could feature there if Shankland is unavailable. Obviously a different profile, but there is that possibility to add to the possible squad selections of Derek McInnes. But yeah, you've gone ballsy with your prediction, and I'm very much here for it. We're going to, unless you've got anything else to add, John, we're going to wrap it this week. What do you think?
If Craig Gordon's in goal, beat them 2-0. Because that man does not concede goals.
Fair enough. We'll leave it on a positive note with that, folks. If you head down to the comment section and drop your predictions for this coming weekend's fixture against Celtic, just how big a game is it? Let us know your thoughts. Are you as nervous as me? Are you as confident as John? Feel free to fire those in the comment section down below, and while you're there, obviously you'll find all of our social media links, so head across to all of our social platforms and follow us, like us, subscribe, all the rest of it. It's massively appreciated. It helps us out. And yeah, if you're going to Tynecastle on Sunday, make a little bit extra noise, get there early, get in and make it as intimidating and toxic as possible, because that is what we can do. That is our contribution as supporters. The club needs the support. The players, we're down to bare bones, but you know what? It might just happen. And if it does, oh boy, it's going to be sweet. We'll leave it there for this week, folks. Thank you as ever for listening and watching. Take care. Have a good one. And yeah, bye for now.